he was drinking the whole time the ship was going down and ended up being the last person on the ship. And he actually rowed the ship down. Like the way that this was described to me and the way that it seemed when I read it, it reminds me, like, you remember when the opening scene of Pirates of the Caribbean, when Jack Sparrow's riding in on his dinghy and it's sinking.
Yeah.
And he steps off onto the dock.
Yep.
They literally say that he rowed down the ship while it was sinking and stepped off of it nonchalantly into the water.
Really? What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another week of the Social Drinkers Podcast, where we discuss the art, the science, and the industry of alcohol. What is going on, social drinkers?
Not a ton. Just got off the old 4th of July bender.
The 4th of July bender. Yeah, when we're recording this, it is just after the 4th of July. And I think Ray went a little bit buck wild over the 4th of July weekend.
That I did. If you see me anywhere on social media, no, you didn't.
Tell us about the weekend.
I didn't even see you.
Surprising. Well, I went up to an island in Lake Erie called Middle Bass Island with a couple of my buddies, and we went a little buck wild, man. I mean, it was a drinking marathon for 3 or 4 days, and it was a lot for all of us. Too much, some would say.
Were you guys doing
Hundreds
shoeies?
of dollars spent between all of us. Actually, I didn't see any shoeies while we were there.
Oh, dang.
You want to know why? Because, Mitch, we're on an island. There's no shoes.
Yeah, it's flip-flops.
Yeah, that's true. Fair. Are there things to go to on Middle Bass Island, or are you just...
There's bars, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Couple of them. Nothing. I mean, it's a pretty small place.
Yeah.
I think the whole island's like 3 or 4 miles. But yeah, I mean, I think there's 3 bars. We hung out at the one that's right by the place we stayed at. It's called Hazards. I think it's called St. Hazards, actually. But dude, I mean, hot tub and a pool next to the bar, little tiki bar. They normally have live music. It was a great time.
Nothing wrong with that. Kate, you're looking particularly pink today.
Well, I was going to say Ray is, recovering from drinking. I am recovering from the worst sunburn I've had in a very, very, very long time. But my body up top is not the part that's sunburned. It's my stomach and my legs. For some reason, I thought, it's a really good idea to not put sunscreen on when I am, fair skinned. I think we talked about this in like a couple episodes ago, but yeah. So
yeah,
different kind of pain.
Different kind of pain. And I'll be the first to say, I warned you about the sunscreen. You did not heed my warning, and now you're paying for
it. This happens every year. I try to manifest an olive skin tone and not put on sunscreen because I think, I'll be fine.
Well, my 4th was the same as Kate's, sans sunburn. I did not get that sunburn. A little bit burnt, but not anything painful or anything like that. But what's everybody drinking tonight?
I am drinking simply lemonade with strawberry.
Okay.
Straight from the jug.
Okay.
Because I didn't want any alcohol.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
In my defense, it's 95 degrees. I played a little bit of golf today.
Nice.
And I'm exhausted. So just don't want to drink.
Yeah. And that's fair. Sometimes no drink at the podcast is a necessity after too much drinking.
There has to be a drink.
Well, right. But yeah, exactly. But alcohol.
Yeah. So same here. I'm not actually drinking anything. I'm drinking water. But if you can't see the podcast, if you're not watching on YouTube, I have this really big, nice Yeti. Highly recommend getting something like this, like a Stanley or a Yeti. It does help you drink a lot of water, but that's not what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about a drink that I had this past weekend. And I've said this on previous episodes, but I am gluten-free And so I like beer. I just can't really drink it. It's hard for me to find beer that I like. And there is a beer that Mitch and I found. Oh my gosh. How long ago was this? Maybe like 5 or 6 years ago?
Yeah, probably 6 years ago when we moved to Nashville.
And we went to this restaurant. It's called Avo. If you are in the Nashville area or visiting, it's like vegan, healthy, plant-based kind of restaurant. And we went there and got a dessert. So it was like a gluten-free vegan brownie. And then they had this gluten-free beer. And it's a dark beer, which is my favorite. And it's called Green's Endeavors. And we looked it up, and it is a Belgian-based beer company. And they at the time, they're really hard to find. They're becoming a little bit more mainstream now. They come in, what size bottles are those? They're bigger bottles.
They're pints, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, they come in pints, and you just buy them like one by one. We get ours at Whole Foods. And I decided to do just a little bit of research. The history isn't really that crazy, but it was somebody who was gluten-free and he loved beer, and he was living in Europe. He's from Europe, and there was not one gluten-free beer in Europe. So he decided he was going to make a gluten-free beer, and he went to distiller after distiller after distiller, and they were all like, nope, can't do it. That's way too hard. Why would you ever want to do that? We're not doing that. Like, no. And then finally came across this guy his daughter was gluten-free. And he was like, I can see how this is such a big problem. We're going to figure it out. And so trial after trial, they eventually figured it out. And now we're distributing to the US. So it's a Belgian-based beer company. I'll have the link to their website linked below, so you can try and find if there's any near you. But highly, highly recommend if you're gluten-free. Even if you're not, it's really good beer.
Agreed. I think people get squirmy about gluten-free, gluten-reduced beer, and many of the gluten-free beers I've had are really good. And Green's is one of the best beers overall that I've had. It's so good. I would recommend it to anybody. That's my pitch.
So that's high praise.
It is. I give it very high praise. It's really, really good. Well, one of the types is really good. It's their double ale. That one is really, really good. All of them are good, but that one, the double ale in the red, it's got a red label on it. It is particularly tasty. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Well, I did bring alcohol tonight because
what am I looking at here?
I'm a savage.
Just what kidding. Are we looking at here?
We are looking at Twin Oast Brewing, which is out of, it's a place.
Port Clinton, I think.
That's right. Port Clinton. I was going to say it's up on Lake Erie somewhere. Port Clinton, Twin Oast Brewing. And this beer is called Ship Burner. It is a porter, and it is a very, very tasty beer. But I bought it because their cans, the branding is just super cool. They've got this almost matte finish to the cans, and I don't know, I just thought it looked pretty sweet with this ship on fire on the front of it. And I like porters a lot, so I figured I'd give it a try, and I would definitely buy it again. I'm a big fan.
Well, Mitch, do you know the phrase burn the boats?
I do know the phrase burn the boats, and that was part of the reason I love this beer so much, because I'm a big burn the boats kind of guy.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, on this beer, actually, in spirit of what you're talking about, I'll read you what it says. So, Ship Burner Porter. Burning the ships is a way of life. It favors the bold, those with guts and gumption. Ship Burner is a brown porter with audacity, displaying flavors of dark chocolate and coffee, daring you to face your next adventure with no plan for escape.
Dude, you better be careful. They're going to hire you to be a spokesperson.
Dude,
Watch out.
One of my career goals in life is to be a radio personality. And so I think all I need to do is just start smoking cigarettes, and then I think I can get there.
Dude, hell yeah.
I think I could get there.
Halfway
because
there.
Just get gravelly, you know?
Yeah, you just need that, like, hello. I can't even imitate it, but you know what I'm talking about. It's that very cigarette smoke voice.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so
I lost my voice a little bit over the weekend, and I feel like I'm a little gravelly today.
Yeah, that'll happen.
Yeah,
that'll happen when you're drinking like that. So what did everybody bring after the 4th of July holiday. What are we talking about?
Well, you guys actually reminded me, talking about these beers and that brewery up in Port Clinton. We all took a little visit to a place in Kent called Bell Tower Brewing Company. And it made me think of my favorite beer that I tried while I was there. And I think it was one of yours as well, Mitch, was Circle Around the Sun,
So good.
which, I mean, absolutely killer. It's a barley wine American beer.
Hmm.
Not even sure what that means, if I'm being honest with you.
I've never had a barley wine American beer until that.
It says it, 50th batch of beer. It was brewed with an excess of 1,000 pounds of malt and 100 IBUs.
It's really good. Also, isn't it like 14% alcohol?
11.4
Oh,
ABV.
I was gonna say it's heavy on the alcohol.
You don't even taste it. And
You don't.
quite frankly, I think tomorrow I might run over there and get myself a growler because I've been thinking about it. And if you're not into that kind of beer, they have everything under the sun, really. I mean, see what I did there? But I mean, they got all sorts of good stuff. I had their Klosh, I think I'm saying that right, which is a golden ale.
Here's the
Killer.
deal with Bell Tower. Ready? I can't do the cross for the A, but it's an A plus. Frickin' A plus. That place is so good. I got a flight of beers. I was pleased with every single beer. They have gluten reduced beer, so Kate and I can drink beer together. They have some of the best French fries that I've had at any restaurant. Their food it's okay. Their food's okay, but the fries, wow. If you are just looking to go in and get some beer and fries, Bell Tower Brewing. Plus, I'm sure Kate will want to elaborate on this. It's a really, really cool building.
Yeah. So they essentially turned a church into a brewery, and they kept a lot of the history of the church. It doesn't look like a modern, when you walk in, it's not modern inside. It's like traditional to the church, and it's super, super cool. They did a really good job.
Yeah, it's a super cool building. I love it. I just love that whole place. Ray, we're coming back to Kent and we're going there. You guys have such better options than we did at OU. It's kind of crazy.
Well, we've got, I mean, that's one of, I believe, 2 or 3 breweries that we have. And then on top of that, we have options for your late night food runs.
Yeah.
Which is a big plus.
You guys have a lot of good food and drink in Kent. It's a pretty cool little town. If you're in the Northeast Ohio region, I recommend taking a night out on the town in Kent. You would have a good time for sure. I, in the spirit of talking about places, realized that recently Kate and I went on a trip to Washington, D.C., and we never talked about it on here. But man, talk about a food and drink town. That place.
Oh, yeah.
You can really get your drink on. And I wanted to talk about it a little bit because there were a couple of experiences, one alcohol related, the other food related, but we're going to talk about it anyway because we can and we will. So let's start with the food because that's a little bit off track for what we typically talk about. Kate and I went to a steakhouse called St. Anselm in Washington, D.C., and I would recommend it to anybody. Everyone needs to go to St. Anselm in Washington, D.C. The decor is amazing. It's all this old American historical decoration. It's a little bit of a tavern, a little bit of a steakhouse, a little bit of a fancy restaurant. And then you get the food and it comes out and it is just 5 stars. It's so good. The drinks are good. Everything about this place I thought was exceptional.
Agreed. And something else that we did there that was really, really fun was we talked a little bit about this in the last podcast because I said that drinks for dessert was becoming my favorite thing. And St. Anselm was actually kind of what propelled me into trying more drinks for dessert because instead of a dessert, we got the Salveray rum, for example.
Yeah. For those of you who didn't see, I held that up.
For dessert, we actually did a flight of wine that is dessert wine. And so we did a port, a sherry, and we did one other. And we were trying to think about it this past weekend, and we cannot remember what the other one was, but it was really fun to do a flight of wine, dessert wine, because it was like sweet and it, curbed that appetite, but for a sweet tooth, but we didn't actually have any dessert because there was nothing that we could actually eat.
Yeah, the dessert wine was really cool. I just thoroughly enjoyed that place. And I think anybody that goes to DC should put that on their list. It is a phenomenal restaurant. But the other place that is drinking related that I wanted to talk about was, and I'll start with, Washington, DC has a ton of speakeasies. If you go online and you take a look through any sort of list online, you can find 20, 30, 40 different speakeasies that you can find throughout the city. And so we decided to try one of them, and it was called Allegory. And the thing I thought was so cool about Allegory was that the entire bar was themed off of a children's book that an author had written. So the menu was her children's book, and then each page would yield you a certain cocktail on the menu. And so you got to order a cocktail that was themed off of this children's book from this author. And I thought it was just really cool. I don't remember what hotel that is in. It's in a hotel, and you go behind these bookshelves, and Allegory is sitting back there. We will put in the show notes which hotel that is, because I'm blanking on it right now. We also spent time in the Hay Adams, but that was not where Allegory was. So that was another recommendation I wanted to put out there. Like I said, there are a ton of speakeasies. So if you venture to DC and you go to different ones, let us know. Show us the ropes. Let us know what we're missing.
Well, I've got two things to say to you, Mitch. First of all, that's a very punny name, because if you don't know what an allegory is, it's almost every children's book ever written. It is a story that holds moral meaning.
I was hoping people knew that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
A lot of people don't know that. Yeah.
Oh.
Hey, not a lot of people are versed in their English classes, man.
Oh, wow. Okay. Sorry. How judgmental of me.
Yeah, right. And then I have one other thing. I need to know what kind of flavor profile is a dessert wine?
Sweet, fruity. Some of them are tart. How about this?
Are they
rather
red?
than not all of them are red. Some are orange.
Not all of them.
Some are other colors. I'm not a dessert wine expert. The ones that we had, rather than giving you a food critic taste profile, the taste profile I would give is they're like pie. They're kind of like a pie. And that could be any flavor. It could be any flavor of pie. There's many different dessert wines and dessert liquors, but kind of like a pie. Yeah.
Tart, thick. Dare I say thick?
Yeah,
to
no.
Describe a
thick, syrupy,
drink,
kind of. If you've ever tasted vermouth, that's the sort of texture, heaviness, weight. I can't remember what it's called. I can't remember what it's called in wine. There's a technical term that we went over on this podcast, and I'm blanking on it right now, but
I know I am too.
Yeah. So whatever, they're a little heavier. They are sweet. Some of them are a little bit tart. Some of them have a little bit of Campari type taste to them, florally type notes and everything like that. So it really just depends what you get. Our favorite was the port, but everyone has their preference. And then you can get into other dessert liqueurs and spirits like brandy and sherry and those kinds of things as well. So
interesting.
Yeah.
I've not heard of dessert wines. That's why I was curious.
They're really good. Very good.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we recently saw a submarine travel to the Titanic and unfortunately not make it back. But that did remind me of one of my favorite drunks in all of history. And I mean, I apologize if I pronounce his last name wrong, because you know what? It's a tough one. But his name's Charles Joughin. And
who's
do you know
that?
Who Charles Joughin is?
No.
No?
No.
I thought you guys would. All right. Charles Joughin was a baker the lead baker aboard the Titanic,
Oh,
and he was not on shift while the Titanic struck the iceberg. He was in his bunk, and it hit the iceberg, woke him up, and word traveled down that they were preparing the lifeboats. So the first thing he did was send the 13 people below him to, like the bakers below him, to take loaves of bread, each of them carrying 4 loaves up to the ships, and they stocked the ships with food, right?
okay.
Well, the first thing he did after that is break out his liquor.
Okay.
And this guy
Naturally.
got hammered. And they say it saved his life. He was drinking the whole time the ship was going down and ended up being the last person on the ship. And he actually rowed the ship down. Like it, the way that this was described to me and the way that it seemed when I read it, it reminds me, like, you remember when the opening scene of Pirates of the Caribbean, when Jack Sparrow's riding in on his dinghy and it's
Yeah.
sinking
Yeah.
and he steps off onto the dock.
Yep.
They literally say that he rowed down the ship while it was sinking and stepped off of it nonchalantly into the water.
Really?
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
And he
Wow.
was
What a
so drunk.
legend.
His I don't know how you would put it, but like he was interviewed.
Okay.
And he said that he didn't even feel the cold. Hardly. He hardly felt the cold. He treaded water for 2 hours.
2 hours.
Until the sun started to rise and he could see off in the distance an overturned lifeboat, and he swam over to it and got aboard that until he was picked up by another lifeboat and taken to the RMS whatever saved him.
Jeez.
And they actually, the only thing that was physically wrong with him were his feet were swollen.
Okay.
And they thawed him out, and this is very ironic, by putting him in an oven.
Really?
Yep.
Oh my gosh. That's funny. Dude, 2 hours in that cold of water,
Negative 2 degrees Celsius.
you're supposed to be dead.
Yes. After an hour, your heart's supposed to stop.
Yeah.
And they said that the
Interesting.
alcohol, see, if he wouldn't have had so much to drink, he would have died faster than the other people.
Huh.
But they say because he had so much, it actually helped him survive because he handled the situation in a calmer way.
What? That's so crazy.
Yeah.
That is
Wow.
so crazy.
Wow.
But
wow.
one of the survivors and a historical drunken legend.
A drunken legend. I love it. That's a great story. Now everyone
That's
out there
amazing.
knows that the baker, you said?
Yep.
The baker on the Titanic was inebriated during his survival of the crash.
And I believe there was that show Drunk History. I believe they did a segment on that.
Oh, did they? Okay, that's
I
probably
think
so
so.
funny. Oh, I'd
But-
love to watch that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Kate, what do you have?
So I have something that I promised a while ago that never made it to the podcast, and that is the wine making process, and then specifically the difference between making white wine and making red wine. So I figured that we would start off with the process in general. So first, before I go through this process, I just want to say this is not the only process. There are so many different iterations that you can use to create wine, and this is just the typical process, the watered down version of what it takes to create wine. So I
So
just
for
wanted
all
to
you-
preface that.
For all you Tom Collins out there,
Yeah.
leave us
Yeah.
alone.
All you Tom Collinses.
Exactly. Okay, so the winemaking process is called winemaking, or it can be called vinification. So if you're ever talking about making wine, now you know you can call it winemaking or you can call it vinification. So start off with harvesting. So grapes are harvested from vineyards, typically during the autumn season when they reach their desired ripeness, and then they can be picked either by hand or mechanically. From there, we're going to crush and press the grapes. So the harvested grapes are crushed to release the juice. For white wine, the grape juice is typically separated from the solids. So the solids meaning the skins of the grape, the seed of the grape, the stems of the grape, immediately using a press. Red wine, the crushed grapes, they're crushed together with the skin. So extracting that color, the tannin, the flavor that comes with red wine that white wine doesn't have. So there's two differences. And then we go to fermentation. So the grape juice with or without solids, so this is the case for white and red wine, is transferred to fermentation vessels. You guys have probably seen beer vessels, there's wine vessels. This is where alcohol goes to ferment. So this is where the yeast is added that converts into sugars and creates the fermentation process. After primary fermentation, some wines will undergo secondary fermentation. So there's an aging and clarification process, which converts harsher acids that can be found in that initial fermentation process so they can become softer, which allows for a smoother taste. So if you drink a wine and you're like, wow, this is super smooth, most likely it underwent that secondary fermentation process to give it that smooth finish. So from there, we move on to bottling. So the winemaker gets to determine, when it's ready for bottling. And from there, that's kind of what you see on your shelves. So
wow.
that's
I feel like I'm back in OChem, organic chemistry.
Are all wines made from red grapes?
No, there's different wines. There's Chardonnay, Riesling, Sauvignon Blanc. Those are grape varieties. Champagne is a type of grape. So the different wines are made from different grapes, which can be different colors depending.
I have another question. This is actually a lot more in depth. You might not know the answer. I was watching, I don't know if you guys ever watched it. It's called Suits. Older show. I was watching it on Netflix, but one of the characters said that he's a champagne connoisseur and that champagne grapes are only grown in a specific region.
Yeah,
region.
Yeah.
In Champagne.
So like
Champagne, France.
It can't be called champagne if it's not from that region.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes, that's correct.
It's much like Scotch has to be made in Scotland to be called Scotch. I haven't done a deep dive on champagne and why it is. I would assume the reasons are probably fairly similar, probably very economic and politically driven. But champagne the grapes must be grown in Champagne to be called champagne. How many times can I say champagne?
Take a drink every time you say champagne. So yeah, that's what I brought to the table. I think it was long overdue. So I apologize if you've been listening from the beginning. I've been waiting for this and didn't Google it. But I thought it would be fun, especially because we kind of like went into wine a little bit to describe the process of creating wine. And a lot of people actually create wine at home. I don't know if you guys have ever had the opportunity to taste homemade wine. My grandpa used to make wine at home, and I've never got a chance to taste his. I was too young, but I did get to taste my friend's grandpa's wine, and it was really strong, but really good.
Yeah, the wine in Nashville, Ariana's grandpa, is that who made it? Yeah, That wine was potent, to say the least. That must have been 18% alcohol.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
I mean, Nick's dad makes wine too.
Does he? I've never tasted it.
Yep, and then he does limoncello as well.
That's right. That's right. I remember you.
And that stuff's intense.
Yeah. The homemade wine, it seems like people get a little bit intense on the alcohol content, but it was really good. The homemade wine that we had, at least, was really good. Do you guys know about the Martinez cocktail?
I do.
You do?
Yes, only because you explained it to me before.
I did. That was a trick question. It was more for the audience. So the Martinez cocktail, I wanted to talk about it because I think it's really interesting because most people don't know what it is. And it's actually the predecessor to the modern day martini that we all know and love so much. You may not have known, because it's not on very many menus at bars and restaurants, that the Martinez is actually where the martini comes from. So let's start with a recipe. If you like a sweeter cocktail, something that maybe a martini is a bit dry for you and you need a little bit more sweetness, the Martinez is actually going to be something you really enjoy. And I know, Ray, you don't really like martinis too much. They're a little bit dry for you, but the Martinez seemed like it was a little bit more enjoyable, had a little bit more sweetness to it. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And that's something I was going to say is like, if you have had a martini and it's not your favorite cocktail, because it's not my favorite cocktail, this is something that might be up your alley for sure.
Yeah. So you'll see the similarities in the recipe. So a martini, gin, dry vermouth. You can add citrus, you can add olive juice. There's some things that you can add, but the traditional martini, gin, dry vermouth. That's what it is. Now, a Martinez is gin, sweet vermouth, maraschino liquor, a dash of aromatic bitters, and a lemon twist. So you can see where there's a little bit more citrus. We have sweet vermouth instead of dry vermouth. There's more sweetness to this cocktail than the martini. And the way that it was created, or the way that it was popularized, was very interesting. So during the mid-19th century, the gold rush was going on in California, and people were traveling in droves across the country into and through a town called Martinez, California. And there was a cocktail at the local tavern amongst the local people that was not referred to as a Martinez at the time, but it combined gin, sweet vermouth, maraschino liquor, and aromatic bitters. And people would use it for a warm-up as they were coming through and dealing with their treacherous travel and striking out through poverty, trying to find their wealth and gold and everything like that. And eventually it became known as the Martinez. Caught fire in Martinez, California, and it made its way down into San Francisco, which is where it exploded and started to popularize nationwide. So San Francisco in the mid-19th century, it had a very vibrant food, restaurant, cultural scene, and the Martinez made it down into that bar scene, began to catch fire by word of mouth, made it over to New York, and popularized throughout. And then in the mid-1900s or early 1900s, during Prohibition, the recipe changed a little bit to combine gin, dry vermouth, and we got the modern day martini that, again, we all know and love today. So next time you're at a bar or a restaurant, probably not a restaurant unless it's a really nice one, order a Martinez. Tell them you want one. See what you think about it. It's a very good cocktail. Again, if you like something a little bit sweeter than the traditional martini, I think you'll really enjoy it. And that's my spiel on the Martinez.
Yeah, we actually had the Martinez when we were in Washington, D.C. So it all ties back to the beginning.
That's right.
At a place called Old Ebbitt's Grill, which is the oldest tavern in D.C.
Yep.
And it's a really cool place. Highly recommend checking it out if you're in the area or traveling to DC. But they did have the Martinez on the menu, and we had never seen it on a menu before. So I got it, and it was just absolutely delicious.
It was delicious, and I'm glad that we now know the recipe, and it's become a part of our regular cocktail repertoire.
Good word.
Repertoire. All right, folks. Well, that's just about all the time we have this evening.
Take us out.
I don't know how.
Alrighty.
Alrighty then.
Alrighty then.
Thank you so much for listening. But thank you. In all seriousness, thank you for listening. If you've made it this far, if you want more of the Social Drinkers, we send out a newsletter every Thursday called Shots with Social Drinkers. It's super fun, just like the podcast. So definitely be sure to subscribe to that. You can find the link to that below. And then we are on all of the social platforms. I think we mentioned this last time, but we recently started tweeting, and it's been fun over on Twitter. So follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. yeah, anywhere that you consume media, we try to be. So yeah, think that's it.
I think that's it. Cheers, y'all.
Cheers.
Cheers.
See you next week.